Today, we're going to look at sustainable marketing practice and green branding. Now, this is a topic that is quite sensitive. Nobody has actually cracked this one. There is no playbook to tell you exactly how to do it, but it is very much the thing that is in vogue at the moment and in the conversations of all marketers as they endeavor to break into new markets, open up opportunities, and in some sectors, literally survive. So this is something that is definitely going to be part of your both strategic and tactical marketing mix as you move forward in your marketing practice. So what is sustainable marketing? So let's take a high level look and see what we think before we delve down into some really good examples. And I've got quite a few examples to share with you in this session. So sustainable marketing integrates eco-friendly practices into marketing strategies to promote sustainability and environmental consciousness. Okay, there's a definition. So basically what we're saying here is that it is good marketing practice that does good for your organization at the same time as doing good for the people and the planet around you. And ideally, what sustainable marketing does as well is it aligns with your customers' values, in essence, really enhancing your brand image if you can make some really, really good gains here and get some good momentum building, and at the same time contributing to the conservation of the environment. So it kind of should be really a win-win, win-win. So literally everybody wins. So why is this stuff so difficult? Why is this really causing us so many sleepless nights as marketers trying to integrate this into our messaging, into our strategies, and into our product development? Well, it's possibly because what we're not necessarily doing is listening to all of the opportunities. We might be thinking that sustainability is all about having some good recycling policies, or it is all about our carbon footprint. But actually, it is much more holistic than that. And this is what we'll explore in this session. Now, we are going to tie in what we might term green branding into this marketing sustainability piece because they are interwoven and interlinked. So green branding, to just give another definition here, involves positioning your brand as environmentally friendly through sustainable practices and messaging. So you need to be doing some things before you can talk about it. You need to be aware of what is relevant for the environment as well as sustainable practice before you can start to integrate it into your marketing communications and messages. So there's kind of an order of play here. It is about making progress. It's not about getting perfection, because you'll be waiting forever for that. Trust me, you really will. So it is about making some progress and then starting to communicate openly and honestly about that progress. So we're not looking, and this is where a lot of marketers get a little bit unstuck because they think we need to be waiting for, to hit a destination, or we need to be waiting for it to hit a certain level. Your market, your eco-conscious customers are not looking for that. What they're looking for, and this is how you can build long-term brand loyalty with these customers, is they are looking for you to communicate your journey. Okay, so green branding alongside marketing sustainable practices is all about communication of the journey. And a lot of people will tell you that it's the journey to net zero that is more important than the destination. And this is because of the cumulative effect of ignoring it and bad practice and consumption. If you start today, you start to eat into the negativity, you start to improve things literally from the very first step that you take. Now, a real world example here is IKEA's focus on sustainable sourcing and a lot of the work that they're doing in energy efficiency in their products, the creation of their products and their operations. And if you search on IKEA's sustainability strategies and the work that they're doing, you will see that there's a lot of communication about the journey. So yes, of course, they're a large organization, so they'll have targets because they'll be needing to report against those targets. But the essence here is being very open and transparent about the journey. And that is what eco-conscious customers, and very likely a subset, if not a significant proportion of your customer base will also be looking for. Okay, so the first tip here is to make a start, is not to just wait, see what the competition do, wait until you've done some stuff, some big significant stuff before you start marketing and communicating it. You can build this into your brand stories very, very early if you are willing to literally go for it, if you're willing to open up and share the journey. Now, we're seeing some very, very significant trends now. I mean, these have been building steadily and gradually over recent years. But as we start now to look deeply into our customer behaviors and preferences, we're seeing growing customer preferences for brands that demonstrate sustainability. It is a massive trend. There's a lot of research on this. Nielsen, for example, have recently said that 72% of consumers globally are willing to pay more for products with sustainable credentials. So in lots of ways, this shouldn't necessarily eat into, the work that you're doing in terms of the cost base, for example, of your new product development. This can be something that adds value and profitability to what you're doing. Now, a lot of people kind of misconstrue this and think, well, okay, if we have sustainability initiatives, they're going to cost us, they're going to take time, they're going to consume some of our resources. Actually, the opposite is true. Excuse me. The opposite is more true for most brands who start this journey. Another real world example is Unilever, of course, very, very well-known sustainable group of many, many brands, but their most sustainable brands are growing 50% faster than the rest of the group, the rest of their business. Now, that's no mistake. That is no coincidence. That is actual reality. And we know that this has been, almost sort of preached, if you like, by a lot of the great thinkers on these particular initiatives. Is that they've believed for some time that this must be true. All of the research is pointing in this direction, and now we're seeing this play out commercially. So if you are currently struggling to get buy-in in your organization, there are now many, many examples of big, well-known brands and of course, smaller micro businesses who are making significant gains within their marketplaces, trading off and around sustainable marketing practice and green branding. It really can count now. So if you think your marketing is all about your products and services, well, there's a third element here that can actually be part of the stories that you're telling, and that is your sustainability story. So where do you begin? What kinds of things are you needing to then share with your colleagues, with your management, with your C-suite? What are they going to be interested in hearing? Well, these are 6 things that you need to be really considering to begin this journey if it's not something that you're doing right now. I've already used the words transparency and authenticity. These are key, absolutely key. Transparency is a tricky one for a lot of organizations because they haven't grown up in this way. They haven't needed or felt that transparency is appropriate, and they will always hide behind the excuse of, well, it's commercially sensitive. We need to keep that hidden until it's perfect. We're now trading in a new environment. Being transparent as a brand is key to building long-term relationships, not only with your customers, but with your whole supply chain and your value chain, upstream and downstream. So the people you're selling through, but also the services that you're buying from. Transparency is key. And of course, alongside that, and probably partners in crime here, is authenticity. If you're authentic, it's very, very hard to get caught out. If you're doing this with a real true honesty and belief that you're doing the right thing, the best you possibly can. And again, we're not using the word perfection here because nobody's perfect. Even the likes of Patagonia will say, we've got so much work to do. And yet we all put them on a pedestal as the best in class, probably one of the greatest brands globally who are taking, great gains and are really kind of the flagship, if you like, of sustainable marketing practice. And yet they will say really open and authentically, we've got work to do. So don't beat yourself up if you're feeling, we're not actually making great gains yet. Transparency and authenticity and sharing that story is key. And of course, that aligns with long-term focus. If you can have a longer-term view, play the long game is the cliche that we always hear here. So yes, there will be some short-term gains. There is tactical advantage here in getting started in this stuff, but there's also a long-term focus in terms of building your brand. What do you want your brand to be identified as and for? And for lots of us, it will be eco-friendly practices. It will be the fact that we can evidence through our KPIs, our key performance indicators, and the progress that we're making along. Maybe we plot a timeline, and the eco-friendly practices that we put in place in our businesses for both operations, for production, for the processes and systems that power our organizations. If we can make those ever more eco-friendly, then that is going to position our brand positively and with a longer term focus. For me, though, the two key things that often get overlooked is being purpose driven and also obsessed by value. Now, what I mean by these two is purpose driven is what is our fundamental reason for being here, our fundamental reason for being in business. And it isn't just to make money. That is the old currency. That's a very old school way of operating now. Our customers do not want to just hear that. Our customers want to hear, okay, you're going to charge me this amount for this product or service. Okay, now I want to look a little bit deeper into how you're going to create that value around that product and service. And I want it to be for higher reasons than just you want to sell to me or you want to make money from me. What I want to hear as a customer is the fact that actually together we are collaboratively doing good for planet. We're doing it with the best possible intentions. And this is sustainable because then your customer's going to be thinking, well, okay, I can buy into you for the long term now because I know you're a like-minded organization who are doing things for the right reasons, and I can buy into that. This is how your customers are beginning, if they aren't already, beginning to think. So transparency, authenticity, a longer term focus than maybe you have right now, even though I totally appreciate you've got the numbers to hit this month. This is about not losing sight of the longer term gain too. Eco-friendly practices throughout your value chain and in the systems and processes that you have. Being purpose driven, working to a higher reason for being an organization, and being obsessed by the value that you're bringing, both upstream and downstream. So who's doing this and what kind of things are they doing? I want to take you through quite a few examples now of organizations who are already on this journey, and you can go and do some deeper research into any that resonate with you. Now, I'm not here to advocate these specific brands in each of these things. I'm not here to say that these are best in class. I'm giving these as examples of ones who talk about this openly and honestly and authentically. To a point, you will always see the counter argument where people will come in and say, well, okay, you're saying this, but, and you're claiming that, but. So there will always be the naysayers. So I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to say, here's some examples you can go and research. The first thing to do, though, of course, is to craft some kind of strategy. Now, the steps in crafting a green or sustainable marketing practice strategy is to assess your environmental impact. Then set some sustainability goals in areas that you would like to see some improvement. Again, not perfection, but improvement in areas where you feel either you're underperforming or where there might be some quick wins. And then integrating sustainability into your core values and your operations. In other words, getting the buy-in across the organization. You might need to start locally if you're in a very large organization or a big corporate or multinational. Start within your team. Start locally where you have a sphere of influence so you can work in and around your team and start to build some momentum. Even that counts. I always use the analogy of dropping the little pebble into a pond, and you see that ripple effect, and it goes far, far, far out from just the size of that little stone or pebble that you dropped in. You know, the ripple can go right to the edges of a pond, and you think, wow, that was a big impact that that little stone or pebble had. We're looking at the same thing here. And then if you begin to understand how you can communicate that transparently, you start to make progress. And this is what it's all about. It's about celebrating the progress, not the end game. The journey to net zero is bigger and more significant than the destination or reaching it. So that's the important thing to bear in mind. And there are lots of frameworks, lots of tools that can help you to craft a strategy. The Global Reporting Initiative, for example, go and have a little look at that one, is a great one for assessing your sustainability. I would always share the mindfulcollective.net as well. If you go to mindfulcollective.net, there's an indexing tool there which will help you in a similar way to get a holistic view of where you are right now and some of the areas that you might wish to focus on. And a great example is L'Oreal's Sharing Beauty with All sustainability program. If you go and look into that, they talk about developing it, they talk about innovating through it, they talk about production through it, and they talk about living and breathing it as a brand. So whether or not you believe in L'Oreal, you like that as an example, it is one where they're making gains. They are definitely getting traction. And there are other, obviously, organizations who would be doing similar. You might also find that by creating sustainable products, this could be an area for your initial communications. It might not be a group-wide process and system or strategic thing. It could be through a number, not even just all of your products, it could be just through a category of product that you have, or maybe even an individual product where you can use eco-friendly materials, you can reduce waste, you can ensure recyclability. So focusing in and getting some wins in areas where you can actually see a tangible difference is really important. And of course, by definition, this will attract, you might define them as eco-conscious customers, and at the same time, reducing your environmental footprint. So watching the outcomes and what actually happens when you do introduce and develop sustainable products is going to be a fascinating, hopefully, revolution. It could be an evolution, but it might be a revolution in terms of the way you do things. I know, again, whether you approve of them or whether you like them or not, but Tesla's EV strategy and commitment to renewable energy is a really interesting one to delve more deeply into. Obviously, many car manufacturers are now looking at electric vehicles as being the new future, and regulation and legislation in many countries is now coming in with target timescales. So they're almost being encouraged, or you could argue forced, to take this stuff seriously. But brands like Tesla, who have grown up through EV alone and not had a traditional combustion engine ethos from the get-go, obviously have grown up and have created processes and systems that create these kinds of products from the word go. So they're in a slightly different position to most of us, but interestingly that we can actually gain some really, really good insight into the work they're doing, but also how they communicate those practices and that branding as part of their broader and wider story. Now, here's a slightly controversial one, and there is very much a divided opinion on the concept of eco-friendly packaging, and particularly if you include the brand Coca-Cola. But I'm going to, because I'd like you to have a little look at this one. Coca-Cola have been reducing their packaging waste using recycled materials, and they've seen some innovations in biodegradable options where they have put some big, big claims out into the marketplaces across the world. And they have created some stories and propositions about their decreasing environmental impact with a view to enhancing their brand reputation. So, for example, their plant bottle, made from up to 30% plant-based materials, is a real-world example of the progress they're making. Now, whether you like Coca-Cola as a brand, whether you support their initiatives, there is progress being made. I'm not here to judge or say this is a good one or a bad one, but it's very interesting that brands who have traditionally been seen as the bad guys are actually on a journey too. So I guess you could ask the question, well, are they there yet as a destination? Well, clearly not, because of the backlog or the backstory that they're having to overcome. But even brands like Coca-Cola, yes, there I said it, even brands like Coca-Cola are on the journey. So whether you like them or not, they are making inroads into recovery. And that, again, is part of this story. And they share very, very openly and honestly, as part of their green branding strategy, the progress they're making through things like Plant Bottle and the plant-based materials that go into them. But it's interesting as well when you look at some of the branding, 100% plant-based that comes through on the branding here on this particular advertisement that you can see. Isn't that interesting when you think, is that about the whole value chain? Is that about the whole kind of, delivery of that product from, initial conception through to actually being in the customer's hands? Well, you could argue no, but we've got to be very careful here in terms of greenwashing and actually using this kind of messaging in an open and authentic way versus in a way that kind of hides some of maybe the backstory that isn't quite so positive. So I'm not going to get deeply into greenwashing here, and I'm not going to certainly point the finger at Coca-Cola, but maybe there are some question marks that we need to be mindful of if we're looking to take some of these examples into our own work and maybe replicate. Having said that, there are other brands who are looking beyond just their four walls in terms of how they do things. Starbucks, for example, has now a deep commitment to ethically sourced coffee, whether or not you like and support the Starbucks brand globally. They are now looking at their sustainable supply chain. They're working very closely with certifications like Fair Trade and the Forest Stewardship Council, and looking to source responsibly, not just from an environmental perspective, but with fair trade, from a community perspective, locally ensuring that their coffee farmers are supported economically and their livelihoods are being supported as part of these initiatives, and really looking at fair labor, reduced emissions, and the broader kind of perspective of their supply chain. So again, for each of us, it's like thinking beyond just our four walls. So I said about starting locally and starting within your own sphere of influence, but maybe as part of your research, it's worth looking a little bit further out. Who's supplying us? Who are we working with? Who do we support? Who do we work and sell through? And actually looking to see whether we can see some supply chain opportunities, which we either want to learn from individually and watch how those organizations and those supporting businesses do their communication too, and or maybe learn from them, because often we will be learning, from looking at some of these examples. And when it comes to energy efficiency and improving the kind of strategy for our operations, I mean, a really interesting example, and again, one of the most energy consumptive organizations you could argue, kind of hidden out of sight from many of our views, is Google and their use of energy. Well, they have a huge sustainability initiative looking at renewable energy that powers their data centers all over the world. And they're now openly reporting on the reduced operational costs and carbon footprint that they're seeing as they switch to energy saving measures, as they switch to renewable energy to optimize their operations. So again, looking into organizations like this, both in terms of the work that they're doing, but also, again, because we're focusing here on marketing and branding and the way to communicate these things, maybe the kinds of dashboards, maybe the kinds of trends and the kind of, the graphs and that kind of thing that they use to report their progress could be something that maybe we could, as marketers, replicate. You may not work for Google. I don't work for Google, but some of the ways that they actually report stuff is actually very engaging, and you can see the progress, you can see the timeline in a very visual sense. And that could be maybe brought into the storytelling that you do. And notice actually on this visual, when we talk about green branding, notice how a number of these colors are using green. We have to be careful when we use that because, again, even the use of the color green is emotive. Because is it green or is it greener than we had before? We've got to be very careful to always balance the little nuances with tangible evidence. That's crucial in getting this right and hoping to avoid some challenges that obviously as marketers we want to try and minimize. And as we begin to kind of really start to think about communicating sustainability, then we need to really be highlighting the green initiatives in our marketing campaigns. And every little step counts. So things like eco labels, things like the way we might engage and support or piggyback onto or blend in with or partner with, collaborate even with environmental causes. Now, we need to be mindful here and conscious of the choices that we make, because, of course, by looking deeply into some of these causes, into some of these other suppliers and some of these other organizations, we need to be sure that they are deeply and carefully aligned with our values too. Because when you start to scratch under the surface of some organizations and some causes, you might find that maybe they're a little too bullish, or that maybe they don't necessarily align quite as they might at first glance. So looking deeply into them will help to build trust and loyalty amongst your eco-conscious customers if you make the right choices. Again, a great organization here who have been looking at advocacy for climate action is Ben and Jerry's. They're doing a lot of sustainable sourcing, and they're doing a lot of advocacy and work with third parties and environmental organizations to align their brand with like-minded value other organizations. So again, do some research into Ben and Jerry's and the work they're doing. It's very, very interesting work. Again, at a global level, a lot of us aren't going to be, if you're listening to this, you might think, oh, well, well, I'm not operating at that kind of global level. No, but there will be organizations who maybe operate nationally where you are, or maybe even locally to where you are, who you could find will be sharing the same values as you. And of course, then you can share in your communications that collaboration. That can also be very, very sort of powerful for you. And it will be as you're doing this and you start to plot and track and then share the sustainability and green branding stories that you're looking to develop and evolve. You will be then tracking appropriate metrics. You'll need to. I already mentioned the phrase KPIs, key performance indicators. You need to really be tracking the things that are going to be most relevant to you. You're going to be tracking the things that your audience is going to be most aligned with and are feeling that are most valuable to them as well for the stories that you're going to tell. And of course, these things could be metrics that look at your carbon footprint, which is obviously a more generalized kind of view, but it could be down to the level of water usage, waste reduction, social impact. There's another one which is directly aligned here. So the sustainability reporting frameworks like the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, are great ones to hook into. You don't have to make this stuff up, okay? So one of the things that a lot of marketers find is that, whoa, at this stage, this is all getting a little bit too heavy. I don't even know where to begin. And you're talking about KPIs? Well, I have no idea what organizations would even think of using. Well, go for some of the established frameworks. The CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project, is a great one that actually gives you a lot of kind of step-by-step checklists and guides. So a lot of this stuff is already templated. You will find that people, maybe even in your industry, have gone before you. But if not, there are templates there that you can start to investigate and look into. And a great example, again, you can love them or hate them, you can agree with me or not, but a great example of an organization that is starting now to really open up on their progress reporting is H&M. Their annual sustainability reports detail now in fine detail their environmental and social performance as part of their trend tracking. So they will be sharing in a very, very open and transparent way the performances that they are seeing and the trends towards a better H&M internally, as well as through their supply chain. And they'll be using the kind of frameworks that we're talking about here. So again, go and look at them as a nice real world example that could make a lot of sense to many of us, I guess. Now, one that has come through sort of loud and clear in terms of really, really kind of owning the whole idea of reporting and sustainable marketing practice and green branding is Patagonia. No conversation like this would be, complete without actually including Patagonia. And there are some fundamental reasons why. If you're not really aligned with the Patagonia brand, it is so well worth you spending some time and looking into the work that they're doing, because the way that they communicate, the initiatives that they do, their environmental activism, they are quite bullish when it comes to activism. Their responsible sourcing, the way that they extend their product life cycles by the way that they communicate. And the example, the big one, obviously, that everybody seems to know is the Don't Buy This Jacket campaign. And the lovely thing about Patagonia is this was not greenwashing. They actually had a process and a system that backed this up. You could actually not go and buy a jacket, but you could recycle and repurpose the Patagonia jacket you already had as part of the campaign. And they actually believed it. They actually lived it and didn't just dream it, they lived it as well. So this is really about the impact that it will have on your strength of brand loyalty, the positive, obviously, environmental impact of not encouraging consumption, and also the way that they have taken complete and utter leadership in the premium fashion wear and outdoor apparel sector. They absolutely own this position by taking these very, very bullish, these very confident, and these very openly shared initiatives. And of course, these environmental and social initiatives become something they then trade on. So it goes through their campaigns, it goes into their reporting, and they live it and breathe it as a brand. Now, this for me could be a medium to longer term view that you might wish to take. It's very difficult to think of an organization who maybe is starting out on their journey jumping straight to this, but having this at the back of your mind as to what is possible is just so motivating. When you think of that kind of brand, you just think of, yeah, that's the kind of brand I'd love to be working with, because it is just right. As somebody used the word once to me, it's wholesome. It's wholesome in terms of it's holistic, but it's wholesome in terms of it's the right thing to do and it's the right kind of marketing to be sharing. And another organization, we've already seen them once, but I want to mention them again because they are bringing the whole green branding into play across store and across their online e-commerce sites as well, is IKEA. Their sustainable sourcing, their energy efficient products, and their waste reduction initiatives are now really, really front of mind, and they're front and center in all of the communications that they do. It's almost that the core IKEA branding is now kind of taking a secondary kind of position, and that the IKEA tradition and heritage kind of is almost one of the underpinning sort of foundations of their brand communications. And they're actually putting the IKEA green branding over and above the core IKEA. So what is the impact of that? Well, it's enhancing their brand image at the same time as reducing their environmental footprint. So behind the scenes, they're having and creating evidence of the great work they're doing, and they're putting that front and center. And it's enhancing the brand image. And you can see this in the IKEA sustainability strategy. So if you search IKEA sustainability strategy, you can read a lot about the work they're doing, the timeline they're working to, how they're reporting it, and the things that we as marketers who don't necessarily, as I said earlier, work for brands as big and as all-encompassing as IKEA, but the things that we can maybe translate into the work that we do in our organizations too. And probably again at the same kind of level, if not even bigger and even grander, is Unilever's sustainable brands approach. I mean, they have the sustainable living plan. This is a really interesting one, which is all about introducing eco-friendly products across the entire group. And we are talking here hundreds and hundreds of categories, thousands of individual products. And they are really focusing in on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions one of the key things that goes into the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So they, because obviously being Unilever, are able to pin their stories against even higher, more kind of international, kind of, you could call them political, but the SDGs are the UN's kind of overarching umbrella kind of ambitions, if you like. And so Unilever will say, okay, we're pinning our strategy against some of these SDGs. And what we're saying here is that we can see faster growth for our sustainable brands, which is leading to positive customer perception at the same time as doing good for the world. So their sustainable living plan is all about alignment of the story. It's not just about saying, hey, we're green, or hey, we're, reducing carbon footprint, but it's about the saying the why. It's putting into context the work that we're there doing. And also for us, of course, if we want to then be aligning ourselves with some high level goals, maybe within our own individual sectors, and I'm talking to all of us here, myself included, in our own sectors, there will be associations, there will be networks, there will be communities who are talking about this stuff. So if you're not in the Unilever space, but you're in a sector where the conversation has already started, go and have a listen and see what you can hook onto, because if there are particular stories that are being shared or conversations that are happening in the networks that are impacting you, so your wider stakeholder group, if the conversations are already there, the question is, of course, strategically, how can I align what I'm talking about with those conversations? And again, not to just piggyback on these things for its own sake, but to give a context as to why we're prioritizing these products and why we're going for these initiatives and why we've got these projects, or why we're improving this system, or why we're reducing carbon here. Well, the reason is to support that conversation that's happening. So putting a context, much as Unilever does to the SDGs, we're going to be putting a context in our own kind of world, if you like. And again, we wouldn't be alone if we start to do this, because, the likes of Timberland, for example, are doing this stakeholder engagement. They're doing it internally, but also with their suppliers, and they're working with customers as well. And some key customers here on sustainability initiatives. They got this thing called Timber Loop, which you can go and have a little look at. And they have this, and again, it's an actual trademark. So they've taken this thing right up to a high strategic level, and they call it its Path of Service program. Go and have a little look at that, because it's really interesting in the way that they are combining their employee initiatives, where they're bringing in, their suppliers, the value chain, their customers, and actually co-creating this kind of value. We talk a lot about co-creation. This isn't something that as marketers we can do in isolation. We need to be thinking about the other organizations and people that we can do this together with. This is really key. If we can then start to build a green community, let's just call it that, green community. Maybe it's lowercase green, lowercase community. It could be a very informal network, but it could also be something that is contractually binding as you start to grow it. But it will strengthen commitment internally and externally. It'll drive innovation, because we can always come up with more ideas. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, Gestalt theory, and it will enhance reputation, undoubtedly, when we can see alignment with like-minded others. People love the momentum that gets built through those kinds of green communities. So think about, who could you associate with internally, through your value chain, and then maybe even more broadly with customers too. And if this stuff is starting to really resonate with you, it is well worth, if you haven't already, consider becoming carbon literate. At Cambridge Marketing College, we spend a lot of time working with the Carbon Literacy Trust and taking people through training to their certification. It doesn't give you all the answers, but it starts you confidently on the journey. It helps you to empower your business to make informed sustainability decisions and really improve environmental awareness. It focuses predominantly on the carbon end of the whole spectrum here. And of course, here today, we've been talking a little bit more holistically, but for a lot of us, the carbon footprint is a key driver in getting this sold in to our organizations. And of course, a lot of companies now are incorporating, literally thousands of companies are incorporating the Carbon Literacy Trust training into their employee development programs. If you go to marketingcollege.com/events, you can see the upcoming carbon literacy days that we host. And in one day, we can get you fully trained so that we can then sort of match you with the certification, which you can then work towards. It is well worth it. Personally, I'm Carbon Literacy Trust certified, and it has really opened my eyes to the opportunities available. That's a really positive step that you can take if you wish to see how to kind of bond a lot of these ideas together. But if you're already there, if you've already done that, and if you're looking to take the next steps, or you've chosen a different route, another organization which is well worth researching and looking into is, particularly with sustainable marketing practice and green branding and communications at the forefront of your mind, is the Anti-Greenwash Charter. This is a charter that aims to combat misleading environmental claims by ensuring that you're transparent and honest in all of your marketing communications. So they have an assessment, they have a process that you can go through to commit to the charter. And that will help to build trust. It'll help to ensure that you're compliant with the regulations. And it does promote genuine sustainability efforts that you're making. So it really will be a great thing that can work hand in hand with your carbon literacy training as well. So it gives you the confidence that you're doing and saying the right things, because what we don't want to do is to fall into that really, really demoralizing space where we constantly are challenged because we're not backing up our claims with evidence, or we're just being a little bit woolly. We're talking about carbon reduction rather than net zero, for example. So it is all about being precise, being really clear, prioritizing and taking those really, really positive steps forward. And when we take those positive steps forward, where are we going to end up? What is the future of green branding? So just a little nod to where possibly this is going. We don't know. Nobody actually knows, because this, for a planet, is the first time we've been here in this way. But as far as I can see, the future of green branding, as far as the trends are going, will be that we will see increased regulation. So if we're not playing the game right now, the regulation and even legislation will come through that says we have to. So from a competitive edge, you probably should be taking the first steps now before the regulation sets in. We're seeing technological innovations come in to really help us. A lot of the frameworks that I've been talking about here, and there are many, many others available, as well as things like AI, which can help to do the background research, help us to prioritize some of the initiatives and the opportunities that we have. It's almost like we're in this perfect storm now within marketing. We can't use the excuse that, oh, I'd love to do it, but I'm not really sure where to start. The research tools are there, the frameworks are there ready to help us. The network's already talking about it. And of course, the third thing that we're seeing as a trend is greater customer demand for transparency. So if you're not talking about this stuff, now is the time to begin to open up, to begin to share the fact that you admit, hand on heart, we're not positive, we're not perfect, rather, as an organization, but we're at least taking steps in a direction that will take us to net zero and beyond. That is the commitment that your customers are looking for. And the opportunities that will come will be zero waste initiatives, renewable energy adoption. It's getting easier and more accessible for every industry, both personally and professionally, for us to make those kinds of decisions. And it won't be too long before we see more of a circular economy where the whole model of consumption and encouraging people to buy more for the sake of buying more becomes yesterday's currency. That is not where the world is going. So the circular economy is going to become more and more obvious. And when we see the likes of, a final example for you, we see the likes of Body Shop's commitment to becoming a B Corp and its ongoing sustainability efforts, they are just a great example of organizations out there who are doing the right thing because it is the right thing. And they're finding that this is actually a commercially great thing to do because it gives them competitive advantage at the same time. So back in the day, this wasn't the case. It was an additional thing you had to do, and the jury was out as to whether it was going to be commercially viable. Now it is a win-win-win. Customers want it, they're asking you for it. Your management hopefully will want it if they don't already. The supply chain, they definitely need it. And you just know as a marketer, it is absolutely the right thing to be doing for your organization, for you personally and your values, but also for the planet and the people that you are serving and that you're part of. This is really the future of green branding. So align yourself and open up the opportunities for any of these things as quickly as you can and take those first steps. And if your very, very first step is to really understand some of the ways you can shape this up and begin to prioritize, then you can learn more and become certified carbon literate by taking your carbon literacy certification. So visit marketingcollege.com/events. And I hope that that will help you on your journey if you need a helping hand going forward.